Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our deep dive into this radical feminist book in order to understand their philosophy and to come up with rebuttals, inshallah, of a diverse nature and, inshallah, from a Muslim female perspective. Let's begin. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Men's moral choices still have a disproportionate impact on women's lives. So men's moral choices. Okay, so let's think for a second here. Do women's moral choices have an impact on men's lives? Yes. She just is upset that men's decisions do. They think this happens because men are physically stronger. They're physically stronger. And, well, when someone's physically stronger than you, there's gonna be a little bit of pardon me, every time I breathe it like fogs up my glasses. There's gonna be a bit of a imbalance there. Even if you made men eunuch soy boys, you're still gonna have that problem. If women and girls had an equal share of the power and resources in society, it would not have to matter as much as it does whether a man is good. Okay, so her solution is equal share of power, equal share of resources. Do women contribute the same amount of resources? So, do women contribute the same amount, let's say, and kind of resources? Okay, to society. So let's look at infrastructure. Do women have equal representation? Should they be forced to be plumbers? Should they be forced to be the plumbers who have to install sewage pipes? If you watch Dirty Jobs, it's a great show, Dirty Jobs, look it up. It's a pretty intense job. Do women work in the slaughterhouses? If you've ever looked at the industrialized slaughterhouses, it's pretty bloody. Would a woman on her period would she be bawling her eyes out when it's time to hang the cow upside down and handle the entrails? Could she stomach that? Okay. So do women contribute the amount of labor the same as men in every single field and division? Okay? Equal share of power. So, power. What responsibilities come with power? When you look at the army, let's say women must be 50% in the platoon, men 50%. Okay. Would that weaken the military? Probably so. If women had to be 50% firefighters, 50% men, to be split right down the middle, how many women would fail at that job? They couldn't physically do it, and it would be totally awful. So, if women think working in an office is the same as doing a manual labor job, that's just not the case. Dishwashers in restaurants. That's a really horrible job. Okay? It's hot. They don't even give them a fan sometimes. And in busy restaurants, a lot of them don't even wear gloves, so their hands are like cracked in soap. You right? It's steamy, it's dirty, it's messy. How many waitresses, because I was a waitress, they go to the dish pit, they see a male dishwasher there. I've only once seen a female dishwasher. And she was older and she struggled. And we had dishes backed up because she couldn't handle the load. So, and I remember they tried to make us servers wash dishes, and I wouldn't do it. It's like, no, I'm not going to make my own drinks, bust my table, wash dishes, and be covered in filth. And, it's just, what are you talking about? Run your restaurant the right way. Okay. I'm hired as a waitress, not hired as a dishwasher. I'm not doing extra job for the same amount of pay. Okay. And so, and yet they put the female manager to wash dishes. It's like, I wash dishes at home, I ain't washing it at work for no extra money. Because so many dishwashers would quit. So, if you want equal share of power, you must be forced into the jobs. So, death row executioner, all the gritty, like, roofing jobs. You can't have your fancy little claw nails and your fake eyelashes in some of these environments. Okay? I would not want to be standing out at 90 degrees with a jackhammer. Like, you drive by these construction sites. It's absolutely miserable. I don't want to do that. Not my cup of tea. Okay? Sure, you can say that women are doctors, they see the blood of childbirth. Yes, okay. Women surgeons, those women have a special gift to handle the stench that is the human body when it's cut up, right? But they chose that field, but it's still not a 50-50 split. Okay? If you want equal share, you must contribute the same things. The same things. You can value mothers being at home, but to say that a stay-at-home mom, like myself, is the same as a combat pilot or somebody in a warehouse, in Home Depot, stacking different things, wearing out their backs and their knees, it's different. We have different roles, and we all need each other. But when it comes to power, a female politician is not risking the same as a male on the front lines in a combat zone. And female soldiers, if they had to have a sword and a shield, like back in the day, and had to go face to face with a male soldier of the enemy, they would most likely lose. So if they're an archer, okay. But if you had a competition, see, this is why if I could control TV shows, it would be women versus men constantly. Okay, running, building a house, survivaling, bushcraft, everything, men versus women. And we would be honest and see the continual pattern, and the women who would succeed would be the women who have to cut off their femininity. They'd have to take steroids, they'd have to look like Johnny Bravo in a wig and heels. Okay? They would literally have to look like a drag queen in order to compete with men. And then a lot of women would realize, actually, I want to be the pretty Barbie Disney princess. I don't want to be doing these labor jobs. And so men are risking their limbs and their health in a lot of dirty jobs. And I think that's why we need to bring these shows back and force women to see that these infrastructure jobs are necessary for the survival of your economy. And when the economy goes belly up, women will scurry to the richest man in order to escape the poverty that engulfs everyone. Okay? So when men are working hardcore in the farms, and there's tons of women, see, this is the weird thing. You'll see women working in the farms, but women want you to feel bad for those women, but they don't want you to feel bad for the men on the farms. So they'll say, well, there's lots of women in poverty who work on farms, which is them saying they should be working in nice, air-conditioned, fancy offices and should be having a princess treatment with a provider husband who pays all her bills so that she doesn't have to do that. But then they want you at the same time to feel bad that a woman does that, but then they want you to see she's empowered because she does that. So which is it? You can't make me feel sorry for you, but also see you as empowered. Those are two opposite things. Either I feel pity for you or I admire you. I can't both pity and admire unless you're just so miserable and you're like a dog that has a broken leg and blind and you're deaf. And you're like, wow, it's still alive. It's still going. So women depending on the welfare state in order to survive so they can have resources is a different thing. Does a woman who never has children, does she contribute the same to the state? Okay, then she's gonna have to, because she's not providing the state with soldiers and citizens. So she would have to provide knowledge. So if you're not providing knowledge and you're not providing children and you're just living on welfare, smoking weed and doing TikToks, are you the same as a woman who's a housewife, homeschooling, who's birthed 10 children? You see, so who's contributed more to the nation? That's what I'm saying. Like, it's a very, very strange thing. I think it should be what you earn. You shouldn't be guaranteed equality. I think more of a meritocracy. You're supposed to have helping the orphans and helping the needy. But someone who hasn't contributed, why do they get to decide how big a piece of a cake they get? A seat at your table. You know, it's really quite a strange thing. We learned this nursery rhyme. Maybe you did too. I'm going to put it concisely. This little chicken or something was baking, like, grew the wheat, ground the flour, baked the bread, and the people who didn't contribute and watched the little chicken do it, because in our stories there's always like an anthropomorphized animal, a humanized animal, and the chicken starts eating the bread, then the others come and say, well, we want some too, and the chicken doesn't say, okay, sure, I'll share with you. It says, no, well, I'm the one who did this, so why should I let you eat it when you didn't help to grow it? You didn't help to grind it. You didn't help to bake it. So why do you get to enjoy the results? So when it comes to resources, if you're not putting in the same amount of effort and energy, why should you get the same amount? If I recall, like, Social Security, some of that is how much you worked and then how much you put in, even though it's a system that's broken now. But people get taxed different based upon how much they've put in and stuff. And honestly, a lot of the people who work very hard, they get too much of their taxes taken out to support those who don't really work as much. And there's a different clause for stay-at-home moms who are they're not just drinking Chardonnay and cheating on their husbands. I'm talking about women who are actively educating their child to be the best version of themselves. Those women are obviously different and should be supported. But no one is fully equal. So to say you get an equal share, if you had a group of people, even a basketball team, not every player gets an equal share of time how they play. You know, some players, they don't play so good, they get benched and someone fills in the role. You know, some people, they just really weren't doing good at practice. They made the team, but they weren't doing that great in practice, so the coach doesn't put them in and only lets the really committed players who are doing good and making all the shots because they want to win. So if you want your society to win, you can't guarantee equal share for everyone who may not put in the same amount of energy and may not even be worthy of it, you know? It's strange, her idea. And that's the sticking point. This sexual revolution is not about making men better. Look at that. She tells you right there, oh, we don't want men to be better. We just want to destroy heterosexuality. This sexual revolution imagines a world where a woman's life does not depend on all of the men in it being good. So, the more and more you look at this, the more you realize how she has been very coddled. She can look at the poverty of the women across the world and say, you know, oh, we need to change it by putting feminism. But women, we will always be at the mercy of men. They are physically stronger. There's no amount of chemicals that is going to make those men automatically like you. Because a gay man, he likes other men. He's not going to simp for a woman. So if someone isn't sexually attracted to you, they will not bend all the rules for you. So this woman wants to destroy heterosexual men when they're the ones who simp for women and actually allow them to have lavish lifestyles. Really examine that. Heterosexual men are the ones who adore women and will have mercy on them, and they're incentivized, like they want to have intimacy with the woman, so they're going to treat her a certain way to get that goal. They want to keep her as a wife, so they're going to do certain things and change a little bit of who they are if they have a bad habit in order to keep her and start a family, and they want their lineage to continue. Somebody who's really into sodomy and isn't attracted to women and doesn't have the incentive to simp for a woman and is not controlled by women, is not controlled by women's sexuality and witchcraft tactics of sexual allure, you can't control them. So it's ironic because gay men are not slaves to heterosexual women. That's not the case. No. In fact, gay men are very free of the spells of women, which is it's really fascinating. So, no matter which way you square it, we will always depend on men being good. Because if men are drunk, they don't want to build bridges. They don't want to do construction jobs. They don't want to do electrician jobs. They don't want to do work in the lumber yards. They don't want to go hunting. Just imagine society gets into a war zone. They don't want to rescue you from the rubble. Your female friend's fat, chubby. There's an earthquake. She can't lift the rock off. She's breathing heavy. She's a porker. Can't even physically lift the boulder off of you. Here comes a strong, stout man. He just thinks, I'm going to leave you under the rubble. You don't want to depend on me being good, so why should I help you? When wicked men prevail, women suffer. Women only can flourish and be treated like queens when there is good men to enable that lifestyle. Wicked men don't care about your lifestyle. They don't care about your values. They don't care about the woke books you wrote. They will conquer you. If you're just as skinny, no robot to defend you, no Second Amendment to defend you, and they just turn wicked, you're donezo. We've watched too many female superhero movies. We've seen too many Arya Starks. It's not real. She takes out the Night King. What is that? Poor writing. We've seen too much of it. We have forgotten our own vulnerability, yet when men are in women's sports, suddenly women remember, oh, it's not fair because they have an advantage because they're physically stronger and they're going to win. So, if we admit men are physically faster and stronger in combat sports and in running sports, tennis, basketball, then we must realize women are only safe in society as long as there are good men. So do you see what she's saying here? Where she thinks that the sexual revolution imagines a world where a woman's life does not depend on all the men being good. You cannot have a good life as a woman without there being good men. How can a woman have a good life when all the men are wicked? As I've been mentioning, I've been looking at the atrocities of World War II on women. From the Japanese to the Germans, what the Americans and the Brits did to German women, you name it. Women suffer greatly when men do not have mercy. Okay? You cannot change that. No matter which way you square it. There have always been men throughout history who didn't care about protecting women. And she's mocked men for seeing themselves as protectors. Remember that. So, are we gonna have like a woman who's like injected like the Hulk with steroids and she's like rah, 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 and she's gonna be our bulldog? Are we gonna have her on a leash to like defend us? Are we gonna have two giant bionic bodyguards as we walk down the street? I mean, when you're pregnant, you're weak. I know The Walking Dead put Michonne fighting zombies while pregnant. I had difficulty even walking up the stairs and had to walk with a cane because my nervous system, my veins were not doing very good and I was struggling with oxygen. So lots of women have difficult pregnancies, okay? And recovering after childbirth, sleep deprivation, you're in a very vulnerable state. Pretending that women are gonna shower you like they're gonna come like doves in a swarm and protect you financially and physically the same as a man would isn't the case. We don't see feminist communes. There is not one that I know of a feminist commune. And then there's feminists who still want men who dress like women in their spaces. So they still let males in. And it's so strange. So strange the backwardness of a lot of these woke feminists, because you cannot have a good life without good men. She's imagining the state, the bureaucracy of the state, to be so gender neutral that it's never going to have a form of wickedness. And I would put it this: if you want a good life, there has to be good men and good women both participating. Women, when there's wickedness, how many women know a guy is married and they still want to get him? They want to break up the home. They want to tempt him. They're sending pictures of their bodies on Instagram to men they know are married because they want his resources. Women harm each other all the time. All the time. Women will dress with cleavage out and have yoga pants on, and they're tempting every man's husbands, and they don't really care about their sisters as they claim. Because if you tell them to be more modest so you don't tempt your sister's husband, like your sister, like your sisterhood, no. Oh, it's just all the man's fault, you know. They should control themselves. But don't put any blame on the homewreckers, you know. It's very strange. It's very strange. This is delusional. Delusional. Ew, it's so humbling when you take a step back, you know, and you're like, could a woman wrestle the average man? Let's have these competitions. Well, that would be kind of haram in Islam. But, because it would, like, you're not supposed to touch non-mahrams. But just taking an average woman and average man can fight. Arm wrestle. Okay. Lift this boulder. Climb this tree. You just start really comparing it so that women can become more humbled. And we can appreciate not being men. See, these feminists, they claim to care about femininity, but femininity cannot compete with masculinity. It's just oil and water, salt and pepper. You just can't do it. You just can't. We're different, and that's okay. But to think that you as a woman can live a good life without it depending on there being good men, that's not true. That's not true, because you need gentlemen. What is that called? Chivalry. You need, you just need that. Good fathers, good husbands, good uncles. Women who have lived at the mercy of cartels suffer. When wicked men colonize an area and take advantage of the innocent women and no good men defend them, she suddenly realizes that she does need the knight in shining armor. When women are poor, they go and they sell their body to wicked men. If there was good men, they would say, no, don't sell yourself. Be a wife. Okay? Be a wife. Don't be selling your body in Los Angeles on the street corner to random guys. That's sinful and degenerate behavior. That's a risky lifestyle. And you're going to encounter a creep who is going to harm you eventually. And then they get trauma and use drugs to recover from that trauma. So, she's backwards. I wonder if me and her will ever have a debate, but, you know, she probably would send her hordes after me. Okay, next chapter, Truth and Consequences. Abuse always has consequences. Up until now, the consequences of sexual abuse have mostly been shouldered by survivors. In fact, right back to the book of Genesis, women have been blamed for men's bad choices and punished for knowing too much, especially for knowing too much about men. So how should culture respond to sexual and racial injustice, now that these things are so much harder to unsee? If men and women want to live differently, the consequences of abusing power are going to have to change. There must be consequences for sexual violence, for domestic I have to use these kind of words so that the video doesn't get any problems, for misogyny and bigotry. Okay, so she said there must be consequences. Honey, there literally already is. That's the thing. So there's social and legal consequences. Misogyny, you can't make someone non-misogynistic. You just can't. I mean, do you think you're gonna nag someone into liking women? Like, if they're like, oh, you know, I see your brain as the size of a walnut. Does that really affect you? You gotta go about your day. You can't change the world. What are you gonna do? You're gonna just put people in prison because they're misogynistic? Okay, bigotry. that's something you can never really fix. You can try, but it's like you just gotta let the grumpiness of people pass you by. If they won't rent to you, sell you a car, you can't force commerce on people in the private sector. Like, if someone meets you and they don't want to sell their car to you, then you can't force them. But if you go to a car dealership, you have a good credit score, you have the money, and they say, sorry, we're not going to sell to you because you're black or because you're Chinese, then obviously that's a problem. You know. But you'd have to prove it's because of bigotry. You know. And she herself is a bigot towards white people. She's a self-hating white, and she's a what is that word? Misandrous? Is that someone who hates men? She clearly doesn't like men. You know, she hates heterosexuals. So should she get some legal consequences for her bigotry towards heterosexuals? So be careful what you wish for, because you may think that what you're proposing won't come back on you, but clearly this book would be evidence against her. Clearly. The fact that generations of men have not faced the same consequences that are now being imposed might feel unfair. But naming violence makes violence visible. Generations ago, xual violence was normalized in a way that we are only now coming to terms with. But generations ago, a lot of things were normal that we now abhor. Social change is painful. There is always a human cost, but it is never as high as the cost of opposing change. For many centuries, abuses of power have been defined and dealt with by the powerful. I mean, if you're weak, you literally can't change much. So of course it has to be someone powerful, because you would have an overwhelming force. You can't be weak and have authority. Only the powerful have authority, so of course they're going to have the power to change, because power grants authority. Authority is power. Men have been allowed to decide what is R-wording is and who deserves to be punished for it. In classical mythology, this shame and stigma of R-wording is borne by victims of R-wording. Yeah, that's true. You know, there's women who like feel shame, and young boys, they feel deep shame. But we see people who do R-wording as sick villains. So to pretend that society is cheering and clapping for the women and men who do that to people is not true. Not true. It's a activity, a horrendous activity that is used in warfare, and their comrades may cheer them on, but people on the opposite side who aren't on that team see those people as evil. So I don't agree with that. She's pretending there's no stigma on the R-worder, when in reality, of course there is. Of course there is. One of them, Cassandra, the daughter of the Trojan king, Priam, is punished for refusing to have intimacy with the god Apollo by being cursed with useless foresight, to know the future but have nobody believe her. So this one is an example of, you know, when you look at something like that, she was punished, but she kept her chastity, you know? And some men get vengeful when they don't get their way. So when you're looking at the Greek myths, there's so many ways you can look at it. It's one of my favorite categories, because it's not as black and white as she's pretending. Most young women live in sexist societies, know what it feels like to be disbelieved without having to be personally cursed by a minor deity. Apollo was not a minor deity, he was a major deity, just to be clear. It's literally Apollo. Okay, so think about this. Why are some women not believed? Is because a lot of women, in order to save their reputation, lie and say they've been R-worded. They don't want the stigma of having just enjoyed the intimacy, but they now have to flip it and say, like, no, he R-worded me. this is a sad affair that women lie about it, but time and time again, because of social media, we are catching more and more women who lie about it. And the propensity for some women to lie so that they don't appear to be whores is something that's very puzzling, because they'll condemn a man's reputation in order to save their own. They won't just say, you know, actually I enjoyed it and it was great and I regret it because it's brings me shame. No, they'll say like, no, he made me. You're like, come on now. You know, you gotta be honest. But some women, they don't want to be honest because they always want to stay in the innocent zone, which is quite sad. Because it ruins it for those who actually have felt that atrocious action. Nonetheless, Cassandra tries to warn her people that Troy is about to be invaded. Nobody listens, and in the end, she is R-worded and unalived along with the rest of her family. So, okay, when someone tells Caesar, beware the Ides of March, nobody believes him. It was a male who told Caesar, right? Told other people. Didn't listen, and he was taken out on the Senate floor. So, there is male oracles and female oracles in multiple traditions, and the commanders and the kings and the queens didn't listen, and something bad happened. Okay? So, using this example is quite stupid, because I'm reading the history of At-Tabari, and there's a bunch of male soothsayers, astrologers, ulemas, like well-learned people, and they're advising these leaders. The Zoroastrians have their advisors, the Persians, right? And they get advice, and they say, don't do this, don't do that, and the king literally does it anyways, and then suffers the consequences, you know? So, to pretend that that in history, there wasn't male advisors who were like, hey man, don't do this. The king doesn't listen, and then the invading army comes and takes out everybody. I mean, come on. Come on. History is riddled with male advisors, viziers, you name it, trying to counsel the leader and be like, hey man, we gotta watch out. They lose the war, they're all taken out. Okay? And let us not pretend that men don't get R-worded in war, because they do, especially young lads, sadly. And this is proven to be true with the more that I've been researching World War II atrocities. I mean, even in that Tabari on the Sassanid Empire, and I mean, there was a story where the king's brother was, I'll put it PG, he was taking all the young males when they come of age and taking them to a tower, doing an atrocious action to them, and then letting everyone know what he did to those young lads so that they would have shame and not be able to assume the throne. And then there was a guard who went and fetched one of the next young lad and realized what that guy was about to do. He put a blade between his sandals and then took out that guy. And they decapitated his, diced his head, and then hung it out the window. I mean, it's really cool when you read the Tabari histories. When you look in the past, and you're like, dang, tons of young lads have been R-worded. Does she care about that? She only seems to care when it's done to women in real life and in fiction, when in reality, you should care when it happens to young lads and men in war, right? Do you recall I saw the film, sadly, where the is not real soldiers, we'll call them, took a Palestinian man behind the shields, and you could literally see the movement of the hips, and they were doing R-wording on him, and it was so severe that the doctors were quite shocked after. So, to pretend that men don't get R-worded is a lie, and it's atrocious that she's framing it as if, only women suffer that. And further, in prison, the gangs and the cartels use that as a weapon. And what do women all the time? Don't drop the soap in prison. Don't drop the soap in prison. And what are these women joking about? They're joking about a man's bum being all soapied up, and then, which is like the butt cheeks is the cleavage, and that for a man in the prison to be like, ah. Now, in the past, they used to have prisons where there was just like all the men would shower together, so that was more possible, because they would have a bunch of shower spouts. Now, from my knowledge, there's been some that are reconstructed to where there's like little concrete walls, where they're from the hips, the wall doesn't go higher than the hips. Others have a stall with a curtain. There's supposed to be a guard there, but I do know that they can pay off the guard and do something. But men do that to other men in an alarming degree that we women have not acknowledged sometimes. Okay? And to pretend that Cassandra here is like, oh, she's the example of, this wickedness. Greek men, okay, in the movie Alexander the Great that has Angelina Jolie, there's a scene where Alexander's father, Philip, they're having a debauchery party, and there's a young lad who's screaming, and he's like, no, no, and like literally the Greek men are doing you-know-what to him against his will. Okay? So, Greek culture was very comfortable with men and men relations, and the elites seem to have, even in fiction and in reality, done this to other men. It's very sad. So, how about you acknowledge that, lady? Because we can look at the sad things that happen to women, but if you're truly an empathetic person, and you're not bigoted towards men, you would feel just as bad for the young lads who have this done to them, and for the victims of war who have this done to them. Okay? Even in the movie that I watched, Come and See, it's on YouTube, the German soldiers were R-wording one of their comrades in the scene where they're torching the village. And so, I can think of countless movies where they're representing what the men did. Okay. Let's get another one. Because we gotta put in the points here. Because she's using fiction to, say like, look, even so back far then, women were being ignored and R-worded. So, this is why I'm pulling up my archive of all the atrocities on men in history, okay? And in today's time. Tyrion Lannister, there's an attack on King's Landing, Stannis is at the wall, and Tyrion says, let's F them in their A's. And what is he referring to there? R-wording? Because it's painful, right? And today, in natural language we call it, people were like, F them in their A, which is R-wording. People say that to each other. It's not the kind of pleasurable rainbow flag stuff. It's like the aggressive pain that's caused by doing such an activity as that. And so, I don't like it when feminists ignore the plight of men because they just really resent men and they dismiss it. When you open your eyes and you see how many young little lads suffer, you're like, you know what? We have to help them. We have to bring awareness to this. Tons of little lads in the Catholic Church, more than little girls. It's really quite a sad thing. So, let us be kind. Let us be truly humble. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Ameen. Then there's the legend of Lucretia. From ancient Rome, Lucretia, in the history of Livy's account, was a noble woman who was R-worded and who eliminated herself to make sure nobody thought she had submitted willingly to abuse. The men of Rome then overthrew the monarchy to avenge her and establish the republic. Over the subsequent centuries, Lucretia has been mythologized as a model of female chastity. Her elimination of herself held up as the noblest possible response to sexual violence. She has been romanticized by poets from Chaucer to Shakespeare. She has been painted naked and in pain and salivating detail by Titan, Botticelli, Durer, and many others. But her own part of the story, as Sandra Josel writes in The Body Female and The Body Politic, was over. Once woman has played her role to attract the villain whose actions set in motion other active males who construct the state, empire, and therefore history in the Roman sense. She must go, how tragic, sigh the author and reader, finding pleasure in the pain of noble loss. So, some women, actually, I don't see this as a glorification. Rather, I see it as somebody, it's a tragedy because you realize she couldn't bear the weight of it. Okay, so I would feel mercy, like she did that to herself. I would feel like, dang man, there's ways to cope with such pain. But we have to remember that some women don't have the same disposition. Some women, I mean literally actually, millions of women through time found a way to desensitize and almost give themselves a form of dementia concerning certain traumas. So they black out that trauma from their mind in order to get about their day. And they go to work and that's happened to them. And they go on with their lives and they still find a way to laugh. They still find a way to do charity and to do good. Some become nuns. Some become public speakers. And they keep going on. But see, as women, we must feel mercy for the little doves who can't do that. Not everybody can be the tigress. Not every woman can overcome pain. Some crumble under the pain. So when I see this is the beauty of mythos, is you can look at it from multiple perspectives. You can say she did it so that no one would see her as a harlot. Sure, some men can see it that way, that she had very noble dignity, and that she didn't want no one to. I see it as her succumbing to people's gossip, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will know the truth, so, you shouldn't have done that. And self-elimination is haram in Islam, and I've read hadiths where you're not even supposed to long for death, okay? And in Islam, the way in which you unalived yourself, you'll be punished with that in the hereafter. So, if I knew someone who was that depressed, I would say, no, you must keep going. I would try to say, you need to get mental help. Take them on a retreat, go hiking, go swimming, try to get them around joy and life again so that they can overcome the trauma. There's different ways various women get over trauma. So the healing process is different for everyone, and there's different coaches for different women's personalities and how they overcome trauma, because there are some women who are very strong. They can live a very horrible life, being constantly abused by men and women. They are just survivors. They are like rhinoceroses plowing through the hyenas. They are scratched and scarred, but they keep on going. They're steadfast. But we cannot expect every flower to have its thorns. See, some flowers don't have thorns. They don't have a way to overcome. So, when we see Lucretia and we see Cassandra, we kind of think about the different levels of strength of different women. Because the mental dispositions of some women are weaker than others or softer than others. There's some, okay, I'll give you a personal example because it's important. I've shared this before. One of my closest friends, her husband's sister unalived herself and left behind their 3-4-year-old because she found out her husband cheated. Whereas myself and others, cheating, you get angry, you may shed a tear, but I'm not leaving behind my kids over no man, you know. In fact, I might even forgive and move on, you know. It's haram what they did, but you have to manage. You have to be like, well, that's kind of just how some men are. What are you going to do? And the sea is full of other men, so if he wants to go with her or he wants to work on the relationship, cool. See, I'm more cold. Some will say I'm shrewd, I'm cold, I'm ruthless. But it's practicality. Because if you have a snake in your pocket and it bites you, you cannot get mad at the snake. You can be irritated that the snake bit you, but the snake is of its nature. And men, monogamy is extremely difficult on men. And once you realize that, you expect quite less, but you pray for the best, right? That's why I am very comfortable with polygamy. Because you can't spend time getting jealous and going insane, you know, because you're going to age and you got to have a little of maturity. So that's an example. You see? Now, there are some women who, if their husband gets a second wife, they can't handle it. They have a complete meltdown. It's the end of the world. They destroy their family. They can't handle it. Other women will say, yeah, as long as I'm provided for and there's no diseases and she's a good sister, you know, okay, I'm going to do my thing. As long as I'm taken care of, that's all that matters. There's totally, some women have a very strong threshold for inconveniences, pain, suffering. They're very enduring. But others are more sensitive, you know, just like some cats, they're very like timid and shy. Others are aggressive. Look at dogs. Some dogs are so docile, like a Labradoodle. You can literally kick them and they still won't bite you. However, a pit bull, smack, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, pit bull will be like, excuse me, do you want to get mauled? You know, you ain't gonna go slap a Rottweiler, Cane Corso, you know, so some of these, a Chow Chow, you know, these dogs, they'd be like, excuse me, but a Labrador is like, and you're like, you weak, dumb dog, you know, good around children, but you're useless other than that. So, in our Earth, each creature has a disposition natural to them, but also there are more fragile dispositions to some and more tenacious dispositions to some. And so when we look at mythos, when we look at historical events, we have to remember that there's multiple ways in seeing the male aggressors and the female victims, right? And, you know, there's a lot to look at that. Will she talk about Ishtar of the Epic of Gilgamesh? Probably not. It doesn't suit her narrative. How about Ursula and the Little Mermaid? How about the Witch and Snow White? Let us talk about the female villains. The Witch in Snow White wanted her heart delivered in a chest, but the man felt mercy and put a pig's heart in it instead. And the witch didn't want another beautiful woman in the land to compete with her beauty. Okay? Let us talk about some of the old myths, the old folktales. And Mia, I love reading them. Because it just goes to show that women are not always the damsel in distress. Sometimes they are the villain. Okay? And look at the prisons, and you can see countless women who did atrocious things to other women, the elderly, animals. Subhanallah, there was a woman who chucked her dog off the balcony, and that made me think that you should have a license to own a dog. Okay? Let us not pretend. Okay? Subhanallah, just some people, man, they always highlight what the men do, and they don't even bother to mention what some of these literally insane women do. Times have changed, and male-dominated mass culture has graciously acknowledged the possibility that women who survive male violence might have other things to do in the story than die. And guess what? Sansa, alright, let's write this. Sansa in Game of Thrones, okay? She married Ramsay Bolton, who is one of my favorite villains, you know? But he took her flower in a violent way, okay? Yet Sansa endured, didn't give up, survived with Theon, Reek, when they marched through the snow, and she ended up becoming Queen of the North. So she didn't just die, okay? She carried on. So let us not pretend that there isn't strong female survivors in stories. But guess what? You have to have creativity. Not every woman has to have a happy end. No one wants to read a story where it's always good that wins. Sometimes you want to see where the evil does win. Because you're like, whoa, that's actually more realistic. Because sometimes evil people do win. If you always have it as a Disney rescue, then you're not dealing in reality anymore, and the story isn't as good. If the good guy always wins, then the story actually becomes boring because you already know how the ending is. When you don't know who's gonna win and there's more of a question mark, then you become intrigued, and it's actually better writing. Okay? The R wording and the elimination of a lover or family member is still a standard way to give male heroes something to fight for. But occasionally, women are allowed to complain about it too, as long as they do it in men's language and on men's terms. In fact, if you go by the endless movies made about revenge for, we're gonna say SV, for sexual violence, what men as a whole seem to think the appropriate response to R wording is one of two things: swooning, followed by eventual lifelong commitment, or a guts-out elimination spree. Male violence is still ubiquitous in the stories men write about women, but curiously, this has not made men any more likely to acknowledge the existence of R wording, much less stand against it. You are such a liar. Such a liar. She's literally pretending that fathers, grandfathers don't acknowledge the existence of R wording and they don't stand against it. Okay, in The Last Kingdom, I had a parrot who I named after Uhtred Ragnarsson of Bevimbo. Sorry, I can't pronounce English stuff. British, whatever. Okay. Kiatan rips the dress of Uhtred's sister. I think it's the sister. The father takes the eye of Kiatan, right? And that was justice, okay? So that was just for ripping her dress and exposing her chest, okay? And revenge was done. And guess what? The Kiatan's dad then burned the hut of the mom and dad who took in Uhtred and the daughter, okay? They die because they defended the honor of the little girl, okay? And you can watch that scene, season 1. And how many of us young women wish our fathers would act like that today? If men acted like that today, there would be a lot less men who would do such actions, okay? And there are countless stories, wartime stories, where men are totally disgusted by what other men did to women during times of war. Okay, maybe she's talking about, is she trying to make us like an India that men do that a lot to women? But I'm pretty sure that they've had protests, right, in India, and there's tons of men who literally they don't want their wife to suffer that affair. They don't want that to happen. It's just ridiculous. See, let me tell you something. when somebody's playing this type of game that men don't acknowledge the existence of R-wording and that they don't stand against it, and that in cinema, both older and modern, there isn't representations of men being harmed and getting justice and women getting justice, this is just disingenuous. Okay? Again, further, hold on. How about you write a story like that and see who buys it? You know, you can complain that there's not enough folk tales where, like, how you like. So go and write one, see if anyone buys it. You know? But it's... Think of Oberyn when... of Dorne, when he's trying to take out the mountain. You killed our children. Remember when he's dancing around with his poison spear? He literally hated the Lannisters, Tywin Lannister specifically, for what he ordered the mountain to do to his sister. Remember? Okay? He wanted revenge for his sister. He loved his sister so much. Okay? And he literally got his head smushed like a watermelon because he didn't take out the mountain fast enough while the mountain was playing dead. But his number one goal and his hatred towards House Lannister was because of what happened, the R-wording and unaliving of his sister and her children. Okay? And everyone was cheering for Oberyn, but the great writing was that he didn't get what he wanted. He didn't get it. But later, the Hound pushes his brother off the tower when there's the sacking of King's Landing, and they go into the flames together. And that's the only way the mountain gets taken out. See, so that was a better way for the mountain to end, because he was so formidable. Like, he was brought back, like, from the brink of death with, Qyburns, whatever the heck he was doing, and served Cersei. Like, it was great writing that the mountain becomes an even worse villain. Okay, but then the dichotomy of him protecting Cersei from her oppressors when the mountain himself was a wicked dude. So the mountain character himself is a fascinating write because you don't get justice for him right away or how you want. So good storytelling isn't just bad guy did bad thing, immediately put down like Old Yeller. Sometimes you need to add more layers to a character before you finish him off. And that's one great thing. So, again, she's picking these very niche, moments of mythos and of history, and ignoring the countless other ones where little lads and young men were harmed by women and others. And so, or the 1001 Nights, the Arabian 1001 Nights. There's some crazy women in there as well. And, it's okay. I got another one. Okay. Domina of Spartacus, the star show Spartacus. She has she's forcing Spartacus to have intimacy with the wife of the man who attacked, who's like his enemy. And Lucretia, I think was her name, ironically. I think they called her Domina, but I think her name was Lucretia too, which is kind of funny. She has Spartacus painted in gold, and then helps this woman to commit adultery on her husband by letting her sleep with the gladiator. And Lucretia purposely walks in, because they have masks on, and says oh, I'm sorry, are you not finished yet? And Spartacus tries to choke that lady because he realizes, he takes her up her mask and sees that that's the villain woman he hates, right? And so Lucretia literally was like a villain, a terrible villain, and she has a crush on the other gladiator, Crixus, I think was his name, and he actually loves another servant in the household, and Lucretia totally cuts her hair and mutilates her because she can't handle that that Crixus doesn't love her, but instead loves the servant girl. And so, if you think about tons of shows where the woman is the villain, causing everyone harm, you're like, hello, there's tons of manipulative, wicked women. But will she mention that? No. Does she mention the victims, the male victims of female psychopathy? Female solipsism? No. So she's really not against the behavior. She's just against it if, a man does it. So you don't actually care. You're just on team female, right? So, subhanallah. I mean, this is one thing I like about reading a lot, is because you gain knowledge both in the past and in the present, and then you're able to really see where someone's coming from, and you're like, I see your agenda. Like, I see her agenda right now. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. May you have found this video beneficial. What are some rebuttals you would give to her? Do you agree with her on some things? And what do you think overall? Please let me know, because it's important for us to have these discussions. How can we fix the problems that we have if we don't actually discuss the problems that are? So keep that in mind. Please like, comment, and share. And if you'd like to support my work and read more about what I write, you can go to www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there. Take care.